Each day we hear that the economy is doing very well and unemployment is down. So what's the problem? Find out on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. It's been on the front page of the news for most of the year. The U.S. economy is in better shape and unemployment is at its lowest levels in decades. But as always, there is another side of the story. We'll discuss this side with two job experts who can give us a broad perspective on the impact that our current economy is having on different communities. My first guest, Ruben Avelar, is the Outreach Recruitment and Registration Manager for JobTrain, a nonprofit career training center in Menlo Park. Ruben grew up in East Palo Alto, has worked at JobTrain for 23 years, and has taken on a variety of roles in the organization. Years ago, he started Raíces de México, a Mexican folkloric dance troupe in East Palo Alto, shortly after graduating from UC Berkeley. Stephen E. Schmidbauer is seated on my right. Stephen is the Chief Operating Officer of JobTrain. Prior to joining JobTrain in 2014, he was the Executive Director, CEO of Child Family Health Entertainment International, a nonprofit organization in San Francisco. Steve holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism, Broadcasting, and Speech from the State University of New York College at Buffalo, a Master of Divinity from the University of Toronto, and a certificate in nonprofit management from California State University, East Bay. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure having you.
Happy to be here.
Yes,
So, do you believe the economy is booming? That the news we read is true?
The economy is booming in some places and not in others. So I think we see that in a lot of different places. And there's the growing wealth in the country, but there's also growing disparity. We see emerging two separate parts of our culture, and the middle class is not so much there anymore, and people are either becoming very wealthy or they're staying in low income and in poverty.
It's booming for certain segments of the population, and for the unfortunately the folks at the bottom are the ones suffering the most. Who have to take on two jobs. They're underemployed, and it's a challenging economy for many people.
So, Ruben, I was going to ask you, how do you explain it? With a booming economy, you know, there is that idea that a rising tide raises all, or a high tide raises all boats. So, or is it that a rising tide raises some boats and sinks others?
I think that's a better analogy, quite frankly. I think that the populations that are being impacted most noticeably are older workers. I think people with low skill and education levels, people that are more sort of on the service level type of employment where they're barely making a living and thus being classified as underemployed and have to pick up another job. So we're seeing a lot of that at JobTrain, of that population coming in and seeking assistance because they're at the end of the rope. They don't know what to do at this point.
So is this anything different than what it's been in previous years?
I think it's more extreme. As you said in your opening, we have the lowest unemployment that we've had in decades. I think today, as the day that we're filming this, the numbers came out and they said The one figure is the lowest it's been since 1973. Was in the news today. So, yes, it's just more extreme, and I think that we have a great prosperity, and we have people that are not participating in the economy. What we need is for people to be able to develop skills and develop their talents so that they can become economically mobile and move up within jobs on career paths.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it, and I happen to be thinking, as Steve was talking, that why the disparity? If the economy is booming, there should be jobs around for everybody. Why is it that there are people underemployed or?
Well, one thing is that the main number that we talk about is the unemployment number. It's one statistic. It doesn't count people who have given up looking for work. So even though the unemployment rate, quote unquote, is so low, it's not a complete measure. It's not measuring all people. There are definitely people who just have, especially after the last recession, which was really difficult for some people, some just gave up looking. The other thing that it doesn't count are people who are working. So they are figured as employed, but they're working in very low-paying jobs. They may be working 2 or 3 jobs, and they're still not being able to make enough for their families to survive. So we have to look at, what is sustainable, what is a livable wage for people to be able to work and have time for their families.
Well, I was just thinking also, when you're working 2 and 3 jobs, that says something about an inability to make ends meet.
Right.
And I heard today that in San Francisco, one would have to work at least make $65 an hour just to afford a 1-bedroom apartment.
And you have to ask yourself, who can make $65 an hour? What type of work would you have to do to earn $65 an hour? And if you look at the folks that are living on the lower end of the income brackets, they don't make $65 an hour. So what happens to them in this economy? Do they not benefit from it as much as the individual who makes $65 an hour?
Well, one other thing that might be a critical factor is the cost of living, which has gone up. I mean, it's one thing to say the economy is booming, but then there is a price to pay where everything has gone up.
And we have one of the highest costs of living in the country right here. And it's something that is difficult for us as a nonprofit trying to secure federal funding because the unemployment rate is so low in San Mateo County, because the county rate for the overall county is so low, we're not able to qualify for federal funding, even though there are pockets within San Mateo County where the unemployment rate is significantly higher. We just can't piece enough of that together to be able to generate federal funding.
So it has to be the county, it can't be cities?
It goes by the county for general Department of Labor contracts. So that is always a hindrance for us. So fortunately, there are wonderful foundations around and corporations that are trying to step in and help. But this is something that the government really should be looking at. And if you look at the federal poverty level, making around $30,000, that's not going to be enough. The poverty level here is much, much higher. Yeah. So from the federal point of view, they would say, oh, well, they're making above the federal poverty limit, but they're still poor in this area because the cost of living is so high.
Well, I also heard this week that the unemployment rate is lower in communities of color
than it has been in the past.
Yes.
But it's higher than the general
population
rate.
still.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that doesn't make the news. What makes the, I didn't hear that.
Of course
I mean, we know what the situation is, but I heard that Latinos and African Americans now have more jobs.
They do overall have more jobs than they had in the past, but the unemployment rate is still
the population
the population is certainly more,
and the wages aren't going to be that $60 an hour.
Right. Yeah, the other thing we've heard is even the general economists nationally are saying that the unemployment rate is so low, then that means that employers are, really trying to hire. You would think that wages would go up more than what they have. And so that is one thing that many economists are saying they're surprised that wages haven't gone up commensurate with the low unemployment.
Is this raise wages across the board or wages in specific areas? For example, housing in the San Francisco Bay Area is like $1 million to $2 million. Now somebody has to be making the money to afford to buy a house at those prices.
Right, and I mean, unfortunately, I don't know exactly the statistic, but there were, in the last 20 years or so, there's been 300,000 jobs created in particularly in Silicon Valley, and there's only been 30 or 40,000 housing units created. So there's just not been that kind of development of housing to keep up with the employment. So of course we have people living further away and busing in, and all of the congestion and commute headaches that we have because of that. So that raises another issue, which is sustainable communities. So even the cities on the peninsula would do so much better if people at all levels of the economy could live in those communities or around those communities in close proximity. There would be a much more sustainable economy for each population area.
But in these bedroom communities, many of the residents like it just the way it is. They would say you would have to build up.
Well, some don't want it.
I know, that's
San
exactly
Carlos
it.
is a good example. They don't want that high-rise development on El Camino where they tore down those old businesses. They just don't feel it's going to be an attractive city. But then there's a shortage of housing, and how do you accommodate the demand for housing and the profits to be made off of rent and leasing? I mean, you get a lot more when you build up as opposed to just building at one level.
But people like the status quo the way it is.
Exactly.
And those are the ones who live in those $2 million houses? Yes. So what's the way out? What are you saying to the clients who come to JobTrain, and how would you describe the clients that you serve?
We see all walks of life, from one end of the gamut to the other side. We see people who are re-entering society after paying their debt to society. We see older workers who have been pushed out of their jobs they had but in the past, and they still feel they have productivity inside of them. They can still produce and want to work in the same industry. We see people who are on public assistance that are tired of being on public assistance and want out. We see young people who have dropped out of high school and realize they're not getting very far with jobs. They want a career. Ex-addicts, homeless people. I mean, we see even professionals who come through and they're wanting to redefine themselves because there's no jobs. The job they had dried up.
It might be hard for some on the more conservative side to accept the idea that you said there are people who live on public assistance, who've lived on public assistance, who are tired of living on public assistance. What would make someone tired of living on public assistance?
The bureaucracy, the paperwork, the ordeal that they have to go through, and it's very little that they get and so they want to find a way, to a better way for their family, a better way for their children to live, basically.
Is there help for all of those people?
Absolutely. We serve people, like Ruben said, coming from all different sectors, and we do have training programs. We also have help for people to get jobs themselves who are, retooling their resume, trying to get the word out, trying to work with somebody on interviewing or brushing up their skills. But we also do have intensive training programs that go for full days, 5 days a week for 12 to 16 weeks. So it's not that long of a period of time, but it's long enough to get the skills and get the certificates that make them employable in construction field, in healthcare, in culinary, in technology. So, there's really quite a variety that's available. And we have relationships with employers to help get them jobs.
And we talk to our students extensively about career pathways and the path they have to take and the options that they have in front of them as they move forward. What we teach them at JobTrain isn't the end. It's just a step in a process. A CNA can become an LVN or RN if they're determined to pursue a healthcare career. So.
And we have Kenyatta College is co-located with us. So people are getting introduced to the idea. Maybe people who just didn't have college in their minds at all are coming. They're seeing that it's there. They're seeing that in some cases they're able to actually get credit for the courses that they're taking with us at JobTrain. The State Employment Development Department is co-located with us, so there's other workshops and trainings that are available to them. There's labor market information that's available to them. So there's really a lot of resources. And then we also now have a career center in East Palo Alto itself, in the new Amazon building at 2100 University, and that's serving all residents of East Palo Alto.
Well, it sounds like it's a rosy picture. But
Well.
I have to ask, there are news articles about people who have college degrees who can't get good jobs themselves, engineers who might be working at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Or a student getting out of college with so much debt can't get a job that would pay enough to let them begin to make a dent in paying down the debt.
We see them too.
And what advice do you give them?
Well, one thing we try to do is provide them some career advising, because sometimes people have some holes in their resume, or there's some areas of the resume that are a concern to us, like it's too long, or maybe the language that they use in their resume, or just we talk about interviewing. How do you interview, or how do you look for work? So it's a matter of sitting down with people and exploring, what have they done, and recommend, advice as to what else they can do. We'll retool their resume. We'll explain the things that we see, because sometimes an individual can get accustomed to their resume and feel that it's perfect, and then someone else reads a third party and it doesn't make any sense. And so we try to explain that to the individuals that come to JobTrain and ask for career advising. This is what we want to do with you, help you out, look at this from a different perspective. Be more aggressive and creative in your job search. Because even interviewing has changed a lot. Looking for work is online now, and a lot of people who don't have computer background, for example, are challenged by doing an online application for a job at Home Depot. So it's hard. It's a different job market, and so we try to teach people how to fill out a job application online as well. So we try to do as much as we can to, with the people that come through, as we understand our economy and the challenges that the people face.
So Ruben talked about a changing job market, and he mentioned people now applying online. Are there any other changes? How would you describe the job market?
I think the job market is constantly changing. So, using tools like we have a very good partnership with LinkedIn. So for people who are on a more professional path, to really kind of do the research, look at what's happening, look at the labor market information, and then go back not just to what you think you want to do, but to look at really what are your skills and matching up your skills with what the needs are in industry. And then, as Ruben was saying, look at it from a different perspective, the employer's perspective, not just your perspective. And that then helps you to be able to sell yourself in a way that matches the need that's out there.
So Steve now just talked about the labor market, what's going on in the labor market. How do the labor market statistics and matching up your skills, by the time you get those skills, would the things have changed?
Depends on the industry. There are some industries that don't change that much, and there are some that are constantly in flux, like the high-tech industry. That one's constantly evolving. And I was in a workshop yesterday where they talked about the new what is it? The new interview technique that employers are using now. They're looking at, do you have a website? Do you have a YouTube account? Do you have, do you have a portfolio, electronic portfolio? I mean, they're asking for a lot up front, and then they're talking about interviewing people, phone interviews, several, other interviews that transpire after that with 1 or 2 people, and then maybe with 4 or 5 people, and a person can go through this whole process, these high-tech jobs, and end up still not getting a job.
It used to be, and I'm sure it still exists perhaps, that there's certain questions an employer can't ask you. Mm-hmm. But now, since they want to know your online record, your YouTube account, your Facebook
LinkedIn,
account,
yes, everything,
isn't that an invasion of privacy?
Well,
I think in some places they even ask for your passwords. It's like, now wait a minute, there has to be a limit.
My goodness, I haven't heard that. Wow.
Well, the stuff I've read, it's to see the type of personality, the type of character you display in public, and do they want somebody who goes out and parties every weekend and puts the pictures on Facebook, and do they want that kind of individual there? So they're kind of looking at character and I guess company culture, and do you fit in? That's a way they can get a view of you that they would normally not get under a traditional interview.
Well, if you can party over the weekend, every weekend, and be good Monday morning, what difference does it make?
I
You can
agree.
be productive.
I agree, but
Well, I mean, one thing we do hear from employers across the board is the need for what we call soft skills. Mm-hmm. So employers can say, if a person has the basics, we can then train them in what we do as a company.
What are soft skills?
But we can't train them to show up every day. We can't train them to have good communication skills. We can't train them to be accountable. We can't train them to have conflict resolution skills. We can't train them to have time management. Mm-hmm. And so these are, no matter, as I mentioned, we have construction, healthcare, culinary, technology classes, but across all of those classes, we're also teaching the soft skills, or what we call essential skills. This is something that employers keep coming back to us for, because especially across generations, that is an issue. Younger people are being tagged with, not wanting to show up to work every day and those kinds of things. So we try to help them.
Yeah, employers say you get hired because of your hard skills, and you get fired because of your because of your soft skills. You get fired.
So let's define the hard skills. Are those the expertise?
Yes.
In a particular field.
Right. Yeah, your background, your experience, your expertise, your knowledge. That's your hard skills. Your soft skills are what Steve mentioned, and that's why people get fired, because they lack these qualities.
And those are qualities you can train? It seems that, certain personalities, you develop certain habits.
Right.
Of course, but JobTrain used to be called OICW. We've been doing this for over 50 years. People know us in the community. We really do this, as I said, classes go 12 to 16 weeks, so they're there Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 3:15. So it's like being in a job, but it's also they're part of a cohort, a group, and so we try to develop what we call a positive peer culture within that group. And so if someone doesn't show up to class, it's not just myself as an administrator or an instructor who's concerned about that. The whole class is. They're all taking responsibility for each other. They're all learning to be a team together. How can we troubleshoot? How can we help each other? And then for some folks that haven't had a lot of success in life, they're not used to being successful, they don't maybe see themselves as being successful, if they can see their peers, someone that they identify with who's finished a training program or finishing a program and getting a job, becoming successful, then they think, oh, maybe I can do that too.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems if the classes run, let's say, from 8 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, you can't have a full-time job and attend those classes.
You can't. Not some people do work in the evenings and attend our classes during the day. Quite a few people are doing that. But as I said, they run 12 to 16 weeks. So, and we also have a lot of supportive services that surround our students, so that they make sure that they're getting all the benefits that they're eligible for. We help them with transportation, we can help them with childcare, we can help them with financial counseling and all kinds of other legal issues and that kind of thing.
So do you, talking about benefits, and I don't know the field, but it's my understanding that if you make a certain amount of money, then you begin to lose certain benefits.
There's income eligibility, yes. If you're above a certain income, you wouldn't qualify for some benefits.
But that income that you might, the increased income might still not be enough to take care of what the needs are.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just talking about basic needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do you find that happens? Where people lose benefits that would really help them get ahead of things because they've and received enough money that makes them now ineligible. But it's still not enough money. I mean, if you're
Right.
working, you need to work 2 or 3 jobs.
There was an example of a person on public assistance who got a job, and because of childcare being so expensive, all her money was going to it, but then she was not eligible for public assistance to cover, childcare costs because she was making too much. And that was very common a few years back when they were trying to push individuals on public assistance to get a job, but they weren't factoring in how getting a job could impact other benefits because it would make them ineligible for those benefits.
So what happened? Do you know in this particular case?
I don't know. I think that's a struggle that the counties throughout the country struggle with. Person gets a good job, but it's not enough to really be self-sufficient, and they still struggle because of childcare costs, big costs like childcare, and others could be transportation too. Yeah, so it's not a perfect system, and there are flaws in the system, and we talk about exceeding income eligibility criteria. I think that it could be improved.
So when we're talking about income eligibility, what are we talking about? What are some of the...
Well, we're usually able to help them in some other way, so like the transportation assistance or the child care assistance, something like that is able to offset some of the other costs. They at least help them get through for 3 or 4 months of this intensive time, and then get them ready to become employed then at that point. So,
are there requirements, work requirements to get certain benefits? I think President Trump is now proposing
it's work or training.
Work or training.
If you're enrolled in a training program, then that qualifies you for benefits. So if you're, particularly a full-time training program like ours.
Has it always been that way, or is this something new?
Back in the heyday of welfare to work, it was that way. You either get a job or get training, and the training had to meet a certain criteria. I believe it was like minimum of 20 hours a week, and had to be verified and all that. But yeah, it's basically been that way.
But if you get a job, you're not eligible for the benefits, are you?
For public assistance, it depends on, again, your income and how that plays out.
Family size.
Do you know what the income levels are?
I don't know exactly
I don't know,
offhand.
Yeah. I've not been involved with the welfare to work program in some time, and they've changed it a lot since I've had my hands on it. Yeah.
Sure. Now, you brought some data along with you. I'm just thinking how many, we talked about some of the programs that you offer. How many students do you work with, and how do they come to you, and what's the success rate?
Yeah, we serve about 500 students a year across all of our programs. So like I said, they run 12 to 16 week cycles, so we tend to run about 3 cycles a year of each program. And so people are, cycling through.
And that's just training, though.
That's just training,
right?
Right, and that's the intensive career training, and about 80 to 85% of them, depending on the class, complete the class. And many of these are people that haven't been successful in a classroom before. And so it's a really good success rate. And then of that, then it's a little bit higher, 82 to 87% of them are being placed in jobs. Mm-hmm. And over 80% of them are still working a year later. So the statistics for the folks who have not really been gainfully employed like that are really good. And we're telling people all the time, you can be successful, and we bring in our graduates who are now working to be able to see, and it works.
How do you define successful?
Being employed, and being employed in the field that you want to be employed in, that you're trained for. So a lot of our training programs, they'll get actual credentials within that field. The construction programs are pre-apprenticeship programs with unions, and so if you can get, you don't even have a high school diploma necessarily, and you can get a job in a union, you can get benefits that can support an entire family.
Yeah.
And
the
build a
wages aren't
pension.
bad either. They're about
build a pension.
$22 an hour at labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Which amounts to how much?
It's about $50 a year, more or less.
$50,000 a year.
Right in there somewhere.
Plus benefits.
Plus benefits.
So for most of those who come through, you mentioned $500 or 500 people cycling through every year, and maybe 80% of those get employment. And of that 80%, we're talking about what, maybe 300 or?
Sure, 300 to 400.
What do you think is the maybe average salary? Would there be an average salary?
It depends on the field.
Yeah.
So, as Ruben mentioned, some folks that are coming to us have been incarcerated or actually are currently incarcerated while they're coming to us. And so for someone in that situation, to find a job is going to be really challenging. So they may start at a lower rate. They may start at $16, $17, $18 an hour.
Doing what?
Doing washing dishes, even, whatever.
Prep in a restaurant.
Doing prep in a restaurant. But because, as I mentioned, the soft skills that we've taught them along the way, they tend to stand out from the other workers that they're working alongside, and they tend to get promoted more quickly. So we actually have a graduate who was in jail, who just a couple of years ago was in jail, got out, was working. I think he was a little bit higher than a dishwasher, but not very much. And now he's a regional manager for Panera Bread. Yeah. And now he's coming back to JobTrain and hiring his staff, from our kitchen.
Is he the exception?
No, we've had quite a few examples like that in most of our classes. I believe we've had people stand out and taken advantage of the opportunity they were given at JobTrain and have made something of themselves as a result of that.
How do you mentioned that some of the students are currently incarcerated. Mm-hmm. So how do they attend?
Well, it's actually San Mateo County, to my knowledge, is the only place in the state. Mm-hmm. You've heard of work furlough, where someone's in jail and they go out to work, like doing the forest fires or that kind of thing. But this is actually a training furlough. So they have an ankle bracelet on, they leave the jail in the morning, get on public transportation, come to JobTrain.
Oh, an ankle bracelet isn't something you can see. An ankle
monitor.
bracelet, it's not like shackles, because
It's under their pant leg, but it's electronic monitoring. So the sheriff's...
So they are allowed out of the
They're
jail
allowed out
by themselves?
By themselves. They take public transportation, come to class all day in class, take public transportation back, and they go back to jail at night. And there's time.
Who does that? I mean, if you have a chance to get out of jail,
well,
you must really be trusted to go back.
These individuals
but
are
they
trusted.
do have a monitor.
They have a monitor.
Yeah.
They have a monitor,
and they're on the end of their sentence, and so they want what the sheriff department wants is for them, when they are released, that they start to work.
So these are people who don't have felonies. I mean, they would be misdemeanors, or they wouldn't be incarcerated because of violent crimes, or...
There are various crimes. They're not the people are doing the hardest time. No, they've been able to move to within the jail. There's the general population, and then there's the transitional housing unit, or people who are coming near the end of their sentence, and so that is the population that we work with to get some people involved in this program. As Ruben said, it's time so that they are completing our program just as their sentence is up, which means they can get a job.
Who would want to interfere. I mean, who would want to sabotage if you're coming to the end of your sentence?
Right.
Of course, you don't want to do anything
Right.
that would increase it. I
But one
would
of the
think.
biggest problems we have in society is recidivism, people who end up going back to jail. And so in San Mateo County, the recidivism rate, you know, in California, the recidivism rate has been around 60, 65%. And for 2-3 year periods that this program has been running, the Sheriff's Department has tracked the recidivism rate for the clients in that program at half.
Well, I would think so, because once you've been convicted of a crime, you know, there was this idea of ban the box, that it's very difficult for you to get a job. It's very difficult for you to get decent housing. And if you can't get a job, what are you going to do? What are the opportunities that are open for you?
But if you're coming out of jail and you're saying, now what I've done while I've been in jail is attend this program, and now I have a certificate that shows that I have a skill that's employable, that employers need. And we, on the other side, we're talking to employers, and we're saying to them, you know, a couple of things. First of all, we're saying, you know, they fill out a job request, and they put at the bottom of every job request, you know, 4-year college degree required. And so we go to them and say, do you really need a college degree to do this job? You know, and if we train somebody to do this, would you be able to hire them? And the other thing we say to them is, because they say, you know, obviously with ban the box now, they can't say that if you have a record you can't apply, but we know what practices are. So we challenge employers and say, would you hire someone with a record? Why wouldn't you? And if we can provide, so we also do stay with our clients for the first year of employment. So the employers know that they can contact us if they have a problem, and we're working all together to help them be successful in that first critical year of employment. So a lot of employers are becoming more willing to take a chance.
Why?
Well, we find that the employers that tend to be more compassionate for individuals that have a background are in construction and in hospitality. There's a high demand for individuals in hospitality in the restaurant primarily, to, you know, they need people they can rely on, that are dependable, that are hardworking, that can produce food consistently on a regular basis. There's a shortage of people to work in restaurants, and then there's a high demand in construction as well. And again, for the same qualities, can I count on you? Are you reliable? You know, are you going to get the job done on time that I ask you to get done? So these are skills that employers are expecting and desire in those two industries.
But
and they're willing to take chances on people.
Okay, because I was going to say the people that they would be hiring under those circumstances don't have a track record that they can point to that would substantiate the fact that they're hardworking, they're reliable.
Well, they can point to JobTrain. And because of our relationship with employers, they're willing to take individuals from our school.
And the other thing is that each of our classes not only has an instructor, but it also has a counselor that's working with the students. So students have these issues, or what we call barriers to employment, and it could be being very low income, it could be having been incarcerated, it could be not don't have the education necessary, or it could be being an immigrant, it could be lots of different things, it could be an older worker, whatever it is. And so we try to match up these supportive services to the barriers and help them get past those barriers. And in that process, the counselor gets to know the student very well, so that as the counselor's communicating with employers, they really can say to employer, this is the best student for this job, this is the best student for this job. And they can, you know, and they are going to have to be working with that employer for years. They want to make sure that the employer is going to be coming back to us, so they're not going to just put somebody in a job to put them there.
Well, that's quite a record, I would think, that you have to maintain if you're working with employers. And they keep coming back to you. What it means is that something about your training has to be right, or else, or they're not getting that many people who are not meeting the standards that they are requesting.
Yeah, and we also maintain the relationship with employers. So beyond just placing people, we're at least twice a year in each of our subject areas, we're convening a group of employers that we call a technical advisory committee, and they're telling us what the changes are in their industry. We're adapting our curriculum to meet what the changes are in the industry so that our students can be most employable.
And I think with our holistic approach in working with the students is it does pay off. When we talk about the success of our students, I think it's a result of us working hard with them on multiple levels, not just in training, but job development and our essential skills. All those elements play a big part, and all the other services that we have to offer at JobTrain, I guess, help the individual kind of navigate, the path that they're on, and kind of develop the confidence they need to see where they want to go and be successful with their training and job.
What are the jobs that are most in demand right now?
I would say construction, medical, and hospitality. Mm-hmm. Those are the three top ones right now. Mm-hmm.
Well, the construction jobs certainly aren't construction for affordable housing, right?
Right.
So what type of construction are we talking about?
Well, you see cranes everywhere that you drive now, so there's tons of construction going on, whether it's commercial or residential construction. And infrastructure, the BART system, San Francisco is redoing its sewer system. So these are huge construction projects that are going to go on for years. Yeah. And the construction industry is, we just had that large increase in the gas tax. Right. I think it was almost, and that's going to go to infrastructure. And so there's lots already building up to deal with highways and bridges and all of that kind of thing.
And you don't have trouble with the unions? Because you said some of them are union workers.
Well, the unions are supporting our programs and helping our teachers in construction are union
because
certified.
Sometimes the unions were very, very closed.
Well, in this robust economy, there's a lot of work, and I think the unions really more receptive to taking on people. We've had students start off as carpenters and end up working as a heavy equipment operator or a cement pump operator, and they get trained by the union to get that certificate, and now they're making $50–$60 an hour and operating heavy equipment. So
and this is ongoing. I mean, it's not seasonal.
Well, they learn the skill, and it depends. They could probably get a job, in this area, and then if it dries up here, there's probably work in Manteca or probably work in Watsonville. If they choose to commute those long distances to continue making an income. I mean, clearly, I think in the Bay Area, as Steve mentioned, there's a lot of stuff happening in the next 4 or 5 years, not only with just construction of commercial and multifamily dwellings, but also infrastructure and a host of other things are going to be happening. The airport in San Francisco is continually
So when you
happening.
talk about market trends, what are we talking about?
Well, it depends on the industry. Clearly there's as Ruben said, high-tech changes really quite a bit. We used to have a coding program, but we couldn't really get people good jobs in coding. So now we have a Salesforce.
Why? Because the language changes so often?
We try to work with a number of different employers in a sector to figure out what are the entry-level jobs in that sector and what are the common skills across those jobs. And in coding, it was a little difficult to piece that all together to ensure that we were going to get the best jobs for our students. And like I said, we're constantly looking at that. Right now, we're offering a Salesforce Administrator program, so to prepare people to take a Salesforce Administrator test to get a certificate as the administrator. So,
Sales Administrator.
Salesforce Administrator. So Salesforce is a database system that is used by many companies. The tallest building now in San Francisco, the tallest building west of the Mississippi is Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. So this is a hugely successful company because so many other businesses are using their software. And so we're training students to be able to administer that software within companies.
In the tech field, how do you find the reception in terms of the big Googles or the Yahoos or the eBays or the Facebooks or the Amazons?
Well, we've had good relationships with all of them, actually. They've come to the table and talked to us about volunteering. They've talked to us about,
Under
funding
pressure.
program.
Under pressure.
Under pressure.
Yes. I would think when they first moved into the area, some of them, like Facebook or Amazon, there was community pressure
Right.
for them to be responsive to the community.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a whole, the high tech, particularly Silicon Valley, it's a different kind of philanthropy. They haven't been philanthropic in the ways that traditional companies have been philanthropic, and
Which would be how?
which would be, really just giving money in a kind of consistent way, setting up foundations and
Supporting
and
special
supporting what's
programs,
happening
yeah.
already in the community. And I think that people in the high tech industry question everything. They disrupt everything. That's part of their ethos, and so they disrupted philanthropy. And they're not just going to give like the banks have given, or like car companies have given, or that kind of thing.
Keeping arm's length.
They're also really want to be in control of what they give, I think. So there's a lot of donor-advised funds. We do have a lot of the nouveau riche, people who have recently become wealthy in the tech industry because of stocks and what the IPOs, the companies going to become public, and so there's a lot of these donor-advised funds at like the Silicon Valley Community Foundation or something like that, where they're really trying to control how they give. And I'll be very honest, they tend to be young, and so we say to them, they say, oh, I think we should solve this problem like this, and we can say, well, but for the 20 years, we know that hasn't worked, and so, let's learn from that. But this is a young person coming in saying, oh, but I think this is a good idea.
Now, talking about the tech industry and the young workers, when older workers come for retraining, would they be retrained for the tech industry?
It depends on what they'd like to do at this point in their career. Again, we carry on an in-depth conversation around their skills and strengths and abilities, and then we also look at their work history, and then we ask, where do they want to go from here? I mean, how many years more do you want to work, and are you prepared to, redefine yourself and start a new career path, or are you looking at just adding another feather to your hat? Maybe it's a certified project manager certificate, or what exactly do you want to do at this point? Work on your resume. So it's just trying to figure out what our job is not to make them do something. Our job is to make them realize what the possibilities are.
So what are the possibilities in a company maybe like Facebook?
For an older worker?
Yes.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't have the answer, because I don't know the dynamics of the hiring process. I don't know the culture in Facebook, at least at my level. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I don't know you, Steve.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think Facebook in particular has I think changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. They've been much more trying to become part of the community. They've been trying to get much more diverse in their hiring, and I think a lot of that has focused on people of different ethnicities or race or that kind of thing. But I think we need to challenge them more about older workers, and I do know that if we can have an older worker who has a really solid, history of work, and they've learned a new skill, that there are some tech companies that we have found that are interested in that because they know the reliability is there, and so this is an employee they're going to be able to depend on.
Or maybe not necessarily the wisdom being there. Wisdom comes with age. Would that be the wisdom to be appreciated? But then all of the tech workers are getting older themselves.
They are, right. Yeah. So that's also, how are they going to deal with that?
As they get older.
They're being disrupted themselves.
Can't stop Father Time.
That's right. So in terms of, if you had to advise someone now, in terms of the job market, in terms of market trends, in terms of, where things might be going, is there anything that you might be able to share along those lines?
I tell them all the time, the best investment you can make is in yourself. And they're going to have to constantly redefine themselves. They cannot stop learning. They cannot stop enhancing their skill set, because this economy is constantly changing in all fields. And I know people say, I'm going to be a CNA. Well, in CNA, you have to do electronic charting now. It's no longer a clipboard. You have to know how to
What's
use
a CNA?
Certified Nurse Assistant, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So you have to use electronic charting now. You have to go to a computer and put your observations, what you think the patient did this evening. So it's very different now, this economy. Everything's more. It's things are in flux. They're changing, and people need to be prepared to, again, enhance their skill set, keep reinventing themselves, because that's the only way you're going to be of value to an employer.
So when you talk about improving your skill set, what does one do? Do you look at what's available in the market, or do you first look at what you want to do? What it is that you like to do, the area in which you would like to work?
No, I think, as Irvin said, starting with the person and what is their aptitude, what is their ability, and so we have ways of assessing them and testing them and making sure that, and someone, sometimes you don't. It's easier for me to tell you my weaknesses than it is for me to tell you my strengths sometimes. And so if we can assess somebody and say, look, you're really good in this area, you should, here are the types of jobs and careers that might be available to you. And then that sparks something in their mind that they maybe hadn't put together before. And if you can do that, that causes a motivation deep inside them to do whatever it's going to take to move along that path.
Are the available jobs here in the area, or do some people have to move?
I think most of them are here. In healthcare in particular, as baby boomers start to age, there's a high demand for certified nurse assistant in this area to take care of people that need assisted living. They need someone to assist them with their day-to-day activities. And so these jobs are here. When you talk about the hospitality, restaurant industry, there's a tremendous need in this area.
Why?
People don't have time to cook. There's no longer that, Leave It to Beaver, June and the Pearl Necklaces preparing dinner all day long. That doesn't exist anymore.
We just lost half of the audience.
That doesn't exist
But
anymore.
eating out is expensive,
But
or it can be expensive.
If it wasn't, the issue with a lot of restaurants I'm discovering and talking to restaurant owners is they can't keep employees. It's too expensive to keep them, and if they pay more, then they have to raise the prices on the menu, and if they raise the price on the menu, they'll lose customers, and it's a big vicious cycle, particularly for the small restaurants. So
this goes back to that sustainability
Yeah.
for communities, that to be able to have a community where people at all levels of the spectrum can live and be able to participate in, and that can help employers be able to, particularly in service industries. But then, there's the whole other levels, there's police officers, there's school teachers, there's all of them have to also be able to live and have a home or an apartment that they can afford.
Yes.
And if you can do that, then you can create a community that really is sustainable. And I know that there have been, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group has convened, things around this, and other cities have talked about wanting to, they're doing whatever they can to help first responders, help educators be able to, and nonprofits like ourselves, to pay our own workforce. At JobTrain is a challenge to get people that can live in this area and be able to help the people who are their neighbors is a real challenge.
So how are you meeting the challenge?
creatively.
Yeah, I mean, we do the best that we can, and obviously we can't pay anybody like Facebook or Apple or Google can. But obviously we attract different people. We attract people who are interested in investing their lives in the community, and so it's not only the exact salary we can pay, but we try to provide enough benefits that can allow a person to be able to raise a family and be able to, provide for the family.
So what advice would you give for viewers who are listening, trying to make up their minds what they'd like to do, or trying to see what they can give back?
Come visit us, come talk to us. There's no cost but your time to do that. I don't know if we mentioned this, but we don't charge for our classes at JobTrain. And the services that we offer, like career advising and all that, it's a no-cost service to the community. And we don't have residency requirements, so people can come from anywhere, which they do now. They come as far away from the East Bay and South San Francisco to take advantage of our program. So just come talk to us and give us an opportunity to have you think a little deeper about your career.
We have some people coming from Stockton, Tracy, Modesto, because they've heard about these programs and they want to take advantage of them.
Do you turn anybody away?
Very, very, very rarely. If there's someone who, really does not have the ability to do, basic 6th grade or 9th grade level, then there are other programs that are better able to serve them. But we also do have high school diploma. We have a partner with an organization called 5 Keys that does the GED and high school diploma. And we also do tutoring to help people. So there may be people who,
Free of charge?
Yeah. So people,
Really?
who have a high school diploma, but then they're going to do construction and they're like, carpentry, and they have to learn the math around that. So we help tutor them to be able to be successful.
And do people give back?
Our students?
Yes, I'm thinking.
The give back we ask for is just to stay in touch with us, because that's really, really important for our data that we collect, to do the reports to show our funders that their investments are paying off, that we are getting a return. People are becoming, they're able to be self-sufficient and be able to live a productive life. So that's all we ask of our students in return. If they want to give more, that's great, but just stay in touch with us.
And they send us their families and their friends.
And that's the give back, exactly.
Yeah, our biggest way of getting people is through word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, famous last words in the few seconds that we have. Anything you'd like to share?
Come on by. Come visit us. We'd love to have you check us out.
It's a very critical time in our economy, and we all have to work together to make this be successful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's a very critical time for us too, since it's the end of the show. So I'd like to thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And I'd certainly like to thank our viewers for watching. Talking about a critical time, we are in very critical times, are we? Do you see it as a very critical time?
Yes. And the expansion has been so long, the next recession could be just around the corner. So we all have to be prepared.
Oh, yes.
We all have to be prepared.
We never know which way the winds will blow, right?
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time. Well, thank you. Now.